All right, guys. Hello. Once again, continuing part two and final part of 3.3. Like I said, I know that it's highly lecture oriented. This last kind of month, but just stick with it. And then next, just know when we do come back, we will jump into actually some hands-on stuff. So there's just so much vocabulary, and same with this one. Where did we leave off last time? We left off at the evolution lab and kind of talking about evolution and adaptations and how that specifically makes organisms, vital to their little niche, as well as why it makes them very specific, right? So if you start changing things, stuff starts to happen. In this part, we're kind of talking about the relationship between animals and kind of the roles they fill within their ecosystems. Okay, so sit back, take notes, and once again, always take your vocabulary because that's in high regard in regards to this unit and this unit test that's coming up. All right, so to kind of go on, just know there are two different kinds. When we're talking about species interaction, we're talking about two different types mainly from here on out: intraspecific and interspecific. Intraspecific competition is competition among members of the same species. And then we kind of have competition is reduced if young disperse or adults and juveniles occupy different niches or maybe eat different things. But this is competition is competition within your species. Think about you competing versus one of your classmates, right? This is you're competing in your species. Interspecific competition is competition between members of different species. So think about maybe a hyena and lion again. They're competing animals. They're competing against each other, or a lion and a gazelle, right? They're competing versus each other. So those are between different species. So write down those two terms, please. Another term to know, predation. Predator is any organism that feeds directly on another organism, whether or not this kills the prey. So example is a parasite feeds on an organism but does not kill it, right? So think of a tick. But also predation can be considered, a lion over a gazelle is a predator over, an animal, as well as a parasite. Even though they're not killing it, a tick could technically be considered a predator. They're feeding off another living organism. Now, so obviously there's kind of these war games that are taking place, right? You have a arms race, let's say, between predator and prey relationships. So this is one of the biggest drives of evolution and adaptation, is this competition between the two. As predators become more efficient, the prey evolve defenses, right? They might grow thorns or toxic chemicals, or they might go faster, right? So there's this arms race of adaptations. Over time, predator and prey evolve in response to one another. This is called coevolution, right? A gazelle gets quicker because a cheetah gets quicker. A cheetah grows quicker because a gazelle gets quicker, right? They're evolving together to outbeat the other. Species with chemical defenses often evolve warning colorations. We'll really talk about that. So species that build up bright colors, that is a form of defense, right? We often know many of our poisonous animals in nature are these very bright colors. Well, scientists think because it's a warning. It says, hey, look at me. I am, full of poison. So, and then harmless species mimic this warning coloration of harmful species to gain protection. It's called Batesian mimicry, or certain species that get the same colors as a very poisonous one just to kind of mimic those type of things, and that's called Batesian mimicry. Two harmful species evolved to look alike, called Mullerian mimicry, or, that's once again kind of goes to the brightness, right? Many poisonous animals tend to be very bright because they are, it's this warning system to others. So other animals know, okay, if it's bright, more than likely I can see it really easy, means it's too good to be true, it's probably poisonous kind of thing. And we can see this, right? At least Batesian mimicry here, where we see, the very top one is a hornet. It has that color of striped yellow and black. Well, this beetle right below it is harmless, but it's kind of built upon the same type of coloration, so that certain species or birds may not eat it because it thinks it might be a hornet, along those lines. So, and then also, definitely write these down, ladies and gentlemen. I will hint, these probably will pop up somewhere on a quiz or test, but there's symbiosis, where two species interact with each other. In symbiosis, two or more species live together with their fates linked. They co-evolve together. They need each other in some sort of way, or at least one needs the other in some sort of way. Mutualism is when both organisms benefit from their association. So example of this is fungus and algae combined to make lichen, right? Another form of mutualism would be bee and flowering plants, right? The flowering plants have evolved to need bees to then pollinate other plants. There's communalism. One species benefits while the other neither benefits nor is harmed. So an example of this is epiphytes living on a tree, right? The tree gets no benefits from them, but one does benefit from the other. So think about those type of species where one definitely benefits, but the other one is not harmed or benefits from it. Parasitism, on the other hand, is a form of predation. It is also sometimes considered a symbiosis because it depends on a parasite on its host. Parasitism is where one benefits and the other is harmed in that case. All right. Write those down, ladies and gentlemen. And these are just a bunch of examples of mutualism. The different types. I'm not going to go through all these, but the bird on the bottom right cleaning the alligator's teeth. So the alligator does not eat those type of birds because it knows it gets a benefit from them, kind of thing, right? All right, now kind of moving on into community properties, or the idea of an ecosystem, and where a community may thrive, and how a community, I guess, grows together, right? So first off, we have two different, productivity type. We have primary productivity, which is the rate of biomass production, used as an indication of the rate of solar energy conversion to chemical energy. So what primary productivity really is, ladies and gentlemen, this nice little term here, is really all the plant life. Everything that uses solar energy grows, right? And that is called primary productivity. Those first basis, producers on the food chain that grow themselves from use of solar radiation. That is primary productivity. All the mass that is grown from the sun. Net primary productivity is energy left after respiration. So, all that, really the net primary productivity is all the leftover plant life material, right? So we have all that energy that's coming in, and then the leftover after respiration is net primary productivity. And we can kind of see this, but like the big ones that we will always talk about, tropical forests, coral reefs, and estuaries, have some of the highest level of productivity, right? Because they receive the most sun. So you have this explosion of producers, and they will have higher primary productivity and also higher net primary productivity in regards to other environments. The other one, I guess going along with this one, but this just shows you a nice graph of, how much primary productivity is going on in certain environments, right? The desert has very little at the top, tundra has a little bit more, but if you go down to the ones that have a lot, coral reefs, estuaries, tropical rainforests have the most primary productivity, or amount of plant life that lives in them. Don't get confused by the animals, right? This is more, we're talking about primary productivity. And then kind of going into this, kind of just to state this, right? That is why tropical rainforests are so diverse and complex. Compared to a desert, right? You're going to get way more different life organisms in a tropical rainforest than you would in a desert environment, because there's so much more primary productivity going on. There's so much more abundance of producers. Thus, you get many more varieties of consumers. And then we can kind of break down these organisms as well. More terms to kind of know. A keystone species is a name of a species plays a critical role in a biological community that is out of proportion to its abundance. Meaning that the keystone species tend to be those ones that just have this overwhelmingly good aspect in helping their environment that they, compared to other species. A big one here would be bees. Bees would be a keystone species, or they fit a very critical role in their community. If you take them out, a lot of problems might happen, right? So example, in the tropics, figs bear fruit year round. In the dry season, this is the only food available for many species. If figs were removed from the forest, many fruit-eating animals would disappear, and this in turn would affect many other plants that depend on them for their pollination. So the fig is a key to the survival of the community, so it would be a keystone species. Guys, I do highly want you to watch this Wolves Change Ecosystems. There is questions on it in upcoming, and you can use it as all the videos in this one are almost essential. I would highly recommend them, and this one's a great one to see how wolves are a keystone species in their environment. So please do watch that. It's one of my favorite videos as well. And then another one to watch is The Death of Bees. This is also a great one to kind of see a keystone species and what happens if we take it out. Okay, so communities in transition. So now we're kind of talking about how do we get to these communities, right? So we know, tropical rainforests are these big, beautiful, communities, but we're kind of looking at it at the very end of the final stages when it's come together. All these organisms have come together and produce this community. Well, it goes through stages too. To build up these communities, it takes stages. And we have different ones, right? We have a primary succession, which a community begins to develop on a site previously unoccupied by living organisms. Example, lava flow creates a new land area that is colonized. The first colonists are termed pioneer species. So primary succession means you have new landmass and a new community builds up on that very, that new landmass that has never existed before. Secondary succession, on the other hand, is when an existing community is disrupted and a new one subsequently develops at the site. We can think of secondary succession as, let's say you have a beautiful forest and a fire comes in, wipes out everything, kills out the community. Well, then secondary succession, a new community evolves after that, right? Or we can kind of think of climate as happening this. Maybe a beautiful rainforest turns into a desert. That would be secondary succession as well. And then we have the other term is climax community, which is a community that develops last and remains the longest. Means it's undisturbed, and it has had this many years to kind of come together and form this community of organisms. And this is kind of what it might look like. Here's what primary succession looks like. But, you have brand new rock, maybe lava flow, right, that forms a new island. Well, then first thing is lichens and mosses start to grow. Then they might die off and provide a little bit of soil, which then grasses and herbs and shrubs and tree seedlings can grow. Then with them, then they die off and maybe produce more soil. Then you can get, mid trees. And then finally, we have a climax community, which is this whole evolved ecosystem. Okay, now, so, kind of talking about these species and these communities that are set. Well, then, now with climate change, we're now getting communities that are changing. We're having species that are being introduced to new communities. Why? Either through human interaction or through climate change. We are bringing these species into the fold in many different environments. So if introduced species prey upon or compete more successfully than native populations, the nature of the community may be altered, right? So if we introduce rats, cats, goats, or pigs where European sailing ships landed, well, they might be able to compete and destroy the natural ecosystems that live in that environment. So introduction of exotic species to solve problems caused by previous introductions, where examples are here, mongoose and rats in the Caribbean who've had this disastrous effect. And then I have two videos linked there, cats of Borneo as well as cane toads. Those are two other invasive species in regards. But kind of end on that, it's very quickly talked about, but please watch those videos and understand how invasive species interact, right? So they're existing species that now come into a new community and overwhelm that community and then kind of take over in a sense. Okay, and then finally, kind of to sum this up, so now we're really talking about, given communities and, human interaction with them, right, and the destruction of them. Now, when in that part, when we're talking about the destruction of communities, we have to talk about deforestation here, or land use. We will talk about this a bit more in Unit 4, which is, or Unit 5, which is land use. But it's important to kind of talk about these things, right? But obviously, through deforestation, we are killing whole communities of species and organisms. You take away, we think we're just taking away the trees. Well, you're taking away everything, because there's no longer a place for these things to live. In 1000 AD, the Earth was covered with 6 billion hectares of forest. Today, give or take, about 3 billion hectares of forest are left. So we've pretty much eradicated half the life on the planet. And how fast are our forests disappearing? Well, we're losing 2.47 acres per second. That's roughly, if you in Thai, that'd be about 5 to 6 rai we're losing per second. We're losing 150 acres per minute, so that would be about 300 to 400 rai per minute, and then 214,000 acres per day, and then 78 million acres per year. And so we're losing forest at a supremely fast rate. How fast are we losing tropical forest? Well, we're losing 1 acre per second, so about 2.25 rai per second. And then continued deforestation will result in the loss of 50% of the Earth's species by 2042. Pretty crazy if you think about those estimates. And then, even with that, we're losing old growth forests. These are forests that have never been cut down. So they have these, they have set full complex ecosystems that may take up to 350 years to mature. And they have a multitude of species with a wide variety of niches. So what we're kind of getting at here is we're getting rid of our old growth forests, which, you can say, well, fine, we can cut down this forest, but then we can grow a new one. Well, no, it doesn't work that way, because we need these complex ecosystems to form, and that can take about 350 years in most cases to form. So once we cut down our old growth, we won't have them again for 350 years. And then we have kind of two terms to really kind of talk about here, but we have clear cutting versus selective cutting. And there's pros and cons versus each. Clear cutting is when you go into an area and completely cut down the whole area. And obviously we often see this one in the news, which is good versus bad, right? But clear cutting cons, you completely wipe out a whole area of land. And then, you have habitat disturbances, you have increased stream flow, so there's nothing to protect the land from erosion because now it's raining. But do know that, when it comes to clear cutting pros, we completely clear out an area where then new life can form very rapidly because it has full sun conditions. Wide open spaces allow the most sun for tree species that require full sun conditions to thrive. It's easier for us to go harvest them, right? To clear cut, you go in an area, cut everything down. Well, you don't have to keep coming back and forth if you're just cutting a tree here and there. And then there's just fewer disturbances to the forest floor, right? You have the disturbance happen once, and then you let it grow, and then, so it's really just one time. And please watch that video on clear cutting in Oregon for me. And that's kind of the other one. Selective cutting, we can kind of talk about that, but selective cutting really talks about, taking down individual trees here and there when they're old. That seems like the more, and usually is the better solution, because you're not completely eradicating an area, but do know that means more human interaction. More humans are going in and out of that forest over and over again, where, clear cutting kind of just that one disturbance. And that's it, ladies and gentlemen. I do want you to watch when happens when continents collide. It kind of really sums up everything I've kind of talked about in this kind of video, this lecture. And I'm going to kind of leave it there, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for once again sitting there, taking down these notes and understanding these processes. If you do have questions, please bring them to class. Write them down. Bring them to class. I'll be able to answer whatever you so need. Okay. All right. Please have a great day. Happy Friday to you all. Enjoy and live life.